so much for joining the League of Women Voters Legislative Week Lunch and Learn Brown Bag session. We have 4 such sessions planned for this week, today, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. We do hope you will join us for all of them. We expect to have robust discussions and presentation by experts in the issues that matter to the League. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan but political organization. We will be celebrating our 102nd birthday on February 14th. So pay attention to what we're planning. You can go to the LWVAZ or the LWV national site to find out what's going on. Every year for decades, the League of Women Voters of Arizona has organized a legislative day at the Capitol. When we all confronted the presence of COVID, we had to pivot, but we did not stop our presence and efforts to educate our members and to raise our voice and concerns with the legislators. In 2021, we hosted virtual sessions. And as part of our virtual program, we have decided to continue this into the new century for the League, keeping in time with the digital opportunities we have to reach a broader audience and to inform and educate both our members and the public. Today, we are here to hear from 2 experts in terms of how does our legislature work and what actually goes on inside. Before we get started, we'd like for you to mute your microphone if it is not. Post your questions in the Q&A. We are going to be moderating those questions. Time permitting, the moderator, who I will introduce in just a moment, will present questions to the speakers. Any unanswered questions, the advocacy team will do our very best to get answers from the speakers and share with those registered for the event. You can contact us at lwvazadvocacy@gmail.com. Today's session is being recorded and will be made available on YouTube. You can locate us on LWVAZ's YouTube account. It gives me really great pleasure to introduce, Jody, if you'll flip the screen and the slide, please. Thank you.
Yes.
Today, we are incredibly fortunate to have 2 experts speak to us about what goes on in the Arizona Legislature. Jody Liggett is our professional lobbyist. It's the first time that the League has had enough resources and is really delighted to have Jody join the League as our professional lobbyist. In addition to having a professional lobbyist, we also have a team of volunteer lobbyists, and Jody has been a great mentor to the group. We are delighted to have Jane Aaron, and Jody will introduce her in depth when she takes over this part of the program. Jody, if you will move the slide. Jody Liggett is a well-known name in Arizona. She has spent many years working in the legislature, worked at the mayor's office, brings incredible talent, is representing as a lobbyist many women's groups. She is our professional lobbyist. She graduated from Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law. She is an ASU graduate. She worked with the House of Representatives. She worked for Governor Jane Hall. She also worked with the Arizona Foundation for Women, served on Mayor Greg Stanton's staff, Kate Gallego's staff, is very involved with Planned Parenthood and with ACWA. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Jody, who will be our moderator for this event. Thank you, Jody and Jane.
Thank you so much. Well, it is my pleasure certainly to introduce my friend, Jane, who I haven't seen in so long. And I'll have to confess a bias. When we were putting together this session, as a former staffer, I said, we don't need to talk to elected officials about the legislature. We need to talk to the people who actually know what's going on, and that is the legislative staff. So Jane is also a graduate from the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law. Go Devils, undergrad too. She did a number of stints while in law school. She was at the Public Defender's Office as Secretary of State. She worked professionally in the House Democratic Caucus and on the Judiciary Committee. In short, she's a legislative veteran. She knows where all the bodies are buried, or the most recent ones, and will really help us kind of step through in a practical way what's going on at the legislature this session. So I'm going to do some level setting first and help our crowd, Jane, understand kind of where we're at. And then I'll let you talk for a little bit and have some questions of you, and then we'll open it up. So I'll just get rolling here. First, what I want everybody to know in advance of our in-person day, it really is your capital at the legislature. I think we can get intimidated by, the buildings and the edifices and not knowing our way around and feel like we're intruders. We are not intruding. That is the People's House and Senate. That is absolutely what we're supposed to be doing, is going there. So we're not interrupting what they're doing at the legislature when we go to testify or we go to meetings with our representatives. That's the whole reason they're there. I also want you to know, in addition to the subject matter and managerial staff, the support staff are so experienced. Many of them have been around the Capitol for decades, and they are so kind. So don't be shy if you get stuck on the RTS kiosk or you don't know where the hearing room is. Just grab someone and ask them, and they'll be happy to point you in the right direction. Sign up for request to speak. Don't be shy about setting meetings with your legislators. Even if it's a phone call meeting, they expect to meet with their constituents, and they're just people like you and me. For sure, when you meet with legislators or ask them a favor, definitely follow up. And all politicians like to be thanked publicly. And we'll return to this theme: staff is your best friend. Just wanted to give you a little overview of kind of who's in charge. Most of you will be familiar with Karen Fann. She's been in the news quite a lot. That's our Senate president. We've got a majority leader, Rick Gray, and another legislative veteran, Rebecca Rios, is the minority leader in the Senate. She's a daughter of Pete Rios. She has a reputation by far in her own right. She's been around for a few decades, actually, and can definitely be of help, even if you're not in her district. On the House side, our real veteran, Rusty Bowers, I think, has been in and out of state government for 35-ish years, maybe more. So he's kind of an old school, old hand. We've got Ben Toma to round out leadership in the majority, and Reginald Boulding, who is minority leader. So it's a different year. That's going to kind of be the theme. We said that last year, right? I think I put up a Facebook post. By the way, I came down with COVID just incidentally. And I said, universe, stop 2021ing my 2022, right? So here we go again. It's Groundhog Day, whatever metaphor you want to use. Really huge COVID impact. So and I'll get into that in a minute, but whereas last year we had remote testimony, now people are expected to come down to the legislature if they want to testify. We've had redistricting this year after the decennial census. We've had 11 resignations, vacancies that had to be filled. So that's 11 new people. We've got elections coming up. We're still arguing about the last election. We've had an audit. We've had an audit of the audit. We've had the rebuttal of the audit of the audit. We've got intra-party squabbles. We've got inter-party squabbles. What's the Supreme Court going to do? And who the heck are these energized people crawling all over the Capitol these days? We don't recognize any of them. So I'll get to that in just a second. COVID impact. So last session, and Jane, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this later on, but it was out of necessity that the legislature opened up remote testimony, but this was just a boon to disabled people, people who are housebound for whatever reason, or people who live in rural areas, or even, just too far outside the Capitol. It was a real leveler, and it allowed people from Kingman to Show Low to Nogales to participate in their government. That's gone now. So that's an argument that we lost, but we should file that away, because the meaningful citizen access, I think we had for a year, and that's been lost. Down at the legislature, it's a Petri dish there. This is not a hospital. Masks are not required. Distancing is impossible and not required anyway. Crowded committee hearings. So you really need to have your mask and be vaxxed, and be aware if you're coming down to the legislature. Even members are not allowed to attend remotely. So this gives you a sense of just, a majority getting dug in and cranky about having to deal with some of these restrictions, and then the members pushing back against that. Many of you may remember that Athena Salmon had a baby, was not allowed to work remotely at the end of her pregnancy, or the beginning of her maternity leave. So that's unfortunate, and that is the cause of some tensions. We've got the audit. It's been all over the news. I won't bore you with all the details of that. The only thing that I think is interesting about that, and Jane and I should pick that up in a minute, is there's this whole hangover effect of the elections, but our Republican Board of Supervisors in Maricopa County stood up to the majority in the legislature and basically rebutted their audit. That was surprising to a lot of us. So you see a schism kind of in the majority, or at least an area of disagreement that we can exploit potentially for our purposes. So we're the League of Women Voters. We think civic engagement is good, right? We want everybody to participate in government. Be careful what you wish for. That's what I have to say about that. It is a very, in all seriousness, we do not have true January 6ers at our Capitol in Arizona. We have people who haven't been there before. They are definitely sympathetic to the January 6th crowd. There's just a new group of people who are coming down to the legislature every other day-ish. I see quite a sizable crowd of those folks. So that's a different experience. And it's, there's an interplay here. So now you have a peanut gallery that's cheering on members when they say things that aren't true. And then you have citizens repeating things from the podium that are not true, but it's being said in this official setting by public officials, and they're not correcting members of the public. I think it's a really dangerous situation. Truth dies slowly, and I really worry that this is kind of an attack on facts. So you've heard me talk. We want to talk to the interesting person on this Zoom and get some perspective from Jane. And Jane, I'll let you just talk, extemporaneously, because you're so good at it. But I just threw up a few things that I hear over and over and over again from members. Like, does it matter, if you remote testify? What if my legislator is mean? What are all these weird terms? What's your advice to everyday people who want to help the league have an impact and protect democracy? It's all yours.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. You guys do wonderful work. I've been aware of you for a long time, of the League of Women Voters, and also, of course, you, Jody. People might not know this, but when I was an intern before and during law school, I interned for the Arizona Foundation for Women, and I was like your super fan. So being on a panel with you right now is pretty exciting. So I'm Deputy General Counsel and Policy Advisor for the Democratic Caucus in the House. I'm just going to explain my role a little bit because it kind of is helpful for understanding the process. I primarily advise on policy that goes through the Judiciary Committee. So I help members draft legislation that would be heard in the Judiciary Committee, and that's primarily the criminal justice system, courts, sentencing, some policing, some gun safety, anything related to the court system. And then I also staff members during the committee process, read the bills that are going through the committee, help them to understand what the bills do, lift up stakeholder impact. That's kind of where your organization and organizations like yours come in, lifting up issues, whether it's, political issues, impact issues, how is implementation issues. Sometimes there will be a bill that affects the way that the court system works and the courts can't quite comply with it. Just lifting up all of the various issues that might come or arise out of legislation, drafting amendments to fix it, to fix those issues, and then continuing to track legislation as it moves through the process. So that's just like a little bit about my role. And I'd be happy to just dive into some of the questions.
Okay.
Does RTS matter? Absolutely. I think that one thing that's kind of one of the earliest and easiest ways to flag a bill, whether it's going to be controversial, whether there's going to be issues, and just kind of getting a sense of who is impacted by this bill and who are the folks that this is going to affect and who are the folks that, care enough to weigh in and also have the access and understanding to know to sign up for RTS and weigh in that way. But it's a way of kind of flagging who's going to be impacted by a bill. So RTS is definitely important. It's definitely something that we pay attention to. It just helps us to get a little more information and background about a bill and who's going to be affected by it.
And Jane, just a quickie on that.
Absolutely.
Someone put in the question box, they've been having trouble lately with RTS. There's some glitches going on, right? It's not us, it's you.
You and me both. You and me both. Yeah.
Got it.
There's apparently been an issue with a router. There's some kind of technical problem, and it's widespread. It affects all of us. I have to anticipate a solid, I don't know, minute and a half to be able to pull up a bill. So yeah. And unfortunately, that's a real issue, and it's something that affects all of us. I hope we can get it resolved soon, because it definitely slows me down as well. Just going through some of the other, what is a striker? So a strike everything amendment is an amendment that, and under legislative procedure, we're allowed to amend bills, and that would be, changing some of the language of a bill. A strike everything amendment allows a legislator to strike everything, remove all of the language of the bill, and insert in new language. And the way that this kind of makes a shift in policy is that there's this committee process, right? Bills have to go through the committee, they get a hearing, there's public testimony, the public has an opportunity to come out and weigh in on a bill. And when that bill can later be stricken and replaced with totally unrelated language, it allows that striker language to essentially kind of circumvent the committee process and not have the same level of vetting and public input that it would have had it gone through kind of the normal process. Are there other questions? Yes, don't give up on RTS. Definitely.
Jody, you need to go back to the previous screen. You moved to the Q&A. Yeah, so she can see.
Got it.
Okay, thank you.
Why does session always run long? Been asking myself that question for a while.
100 days.
Yeah, last session we went pretty long. It can go, it's for a number of reasons. It ultimately comes down to the legislature has one very important responsibility, and that is to pass the state budget each year. And in order to do that, you have to get the amount of votes that you need in order to pass the state budget. And sometimes that takes more negotiation than others. You know, it takes a long time to kind of wrangle people and get everyone on the same page to get the state budget through. So that sometimes, because of political considerations, can take a lot longer than others. This past session, we went until right up against, I think it was June 30th that we finally ended. And session usually ends sometime in May, early to mid-May. So it definitely went quite a bit later this past time. And, you know, I'm expecting it probably won't be that much shorter this time around either.
Jane, back on, we're never going to get off RTS, but it's a great question. Do comments matter? I know a lot of us go to a lot of trouble to go ahead and put comments, and then you feel like you've just sent it into the ether. Does anybody read that? I mean, I know this is back in the day, but I know the governor's office pays attention to those when they get the bills to sign or veto. But what about in the legislative process? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Comments matter. That's definitely, I mean, I read them, you know, because I'm looking at a bill and I'm looking at it through my lens, right? And my perspective. And I always want to see what other people are flagging and seeing when they're reading a bill. So that can definitely flag new pieces of information, new issues I hadn't thought of, new people and communities that might be impacted by a bill that I didn't realize were going to be affected by it. All of that is things that I read through the RTS comments for. And I've seen legislators read straight out, I mean, into the microphone, like read comments from the RTS. You know, it's kind of a way of submitting your Q&A for the committee if you're not able to be there. Now, that doesn't always happen. There's no guarantee, but it's definitely something that people pay attention to. And I'm just a big fan of participatory democracy in general. So I think the more comments, the more people are engaging, the better.
That's great. And that's reassuring, because I know the league, I mean, we have issue teams, we have people writing summaries, we have people writing testimonies. So that's a big deal. Someone has asked about ALEC, and, you know, can you tell an ALEC bill? Do you have an idea, you know, how many of the bills that are filed are templates from interest groups or other states? I mean, how much of that are we dealing with? Because, you know, if you watch the news, you might think the Koch brothers are down there just directing activities. I mean, what's it like in real life?
There's definitely a decent amount of, we call it model legislation. And to be clear, you know, model legislation, it's not always a bad thing. I mean, if depending on where it's coming from, the vetting process, you know, sometimes you can look at it as ideas that have been worked on a more national level, and have kind of circulated and made the rounds in other states. So you can, you know, theoretically get a sense of implementation issues, how it worked out in other states. So, I mean, there's arguments, you know, for and against model legislation. In terms of how much of it is model legislation, I would hazard maybe, I don't know, 30-40% is coming from somewhere else. But it's really a hodgepodge. It's a combination of model bills, legislation that's being pushed by those kind of big organizations and think tanks that you think of when you think about people who are developing policy. But then there's also tons of agency bills and a lot of bills that come from constituents, quite frankly. You know, a constituent in my district had this problem and came up against the zoning ordinance, or had this issue with their neighbor and didn't have a remedy. It's definitely a combination of, yes, there's the model legislation and the ALEC bills, but then there's also a lot of, you know, kind of homegrown legislation. as well as the agency stuff. So I think it's probably evenly broken down into those different categories.
That's so interesting. So, and it's with us, whether we like it or not, right? It's funny, I just threw this question up there kind of on spec, but now somebody has asked it legitimately. What if your legislator won't meet with you?
Oh gosh, well, you can, each district has 2 House members and 1 Senate member. So maybe trying to get one of the other ones, you've got a 1 out of 3 chance. If with just that one, maybe try their seatmate or try someone in the Senate. Also, depending on the issue, there are certain legislators that have become really involved in certain issue areas and become, kind of known for their advocacy in those areas. So you could also reach out to someone who maybe isn't your legislator, but works on the issue that you're interested in discussing. Right,
because in a way, we all are constituents of all of the legislators, right?
Yeah,
I mean, they're
absolutely.
there. And it doesn't matter. I mean, of course, you're more likely to be on the same page, maybe if you happen to be of the same political party as your representative. But if you're not, I mean, you shouldn't not meet with them. Absolutely. I mean, right, Jane? I think it almost might be imperative that you meet with someone from the opposite party. That's just good to do. So, but I mean, obviously they should be meeting with the public. Right? That's their job. If they're ducking you, I think there's very little profit in like trying to make someone meet with you. But yeah, go around them, go to their seatmate, go to a subject matter expert in the legislature, which there are a lot. So,
Jody, can we focus a little bit on the minority bills, because we go back the slide. Because we have had some really good bills, even this session, where we've had, I think, about 30 or 40 bills in areas that we care about as the league. And yet, it doesn't seem hopeful that they'll even get a hearing. So can you speak to that? And, we all recognize the notion of, the power as, elections have consequences, but, still, speak to that, Jane, for us, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that yes, minority bills matter, although I'm obviously biased because I work for the minority. But one thing we've definitely seen in recent years that I think sounds like, from talking to the lobbyists that have been around for 15, 20 years, it does seem like there's been a shift recently in the past few years that Democrats are getting their bills heard. Things are moving much more so. Even than when I first started, I would see maybe 1 or 2 Democratic sponsors ever get a bill heard in the Judiciary Committee. And now, we'll see a solid 5 to 10 bills at least coming from members of the minority. So there's definitely, Democratic bills definitely have the potential to move. And the other thing is they have the potential to be repurposed and either added as an amendment into another bill that's already moving, or through the striker process, or frankly, Republican sponsors will pick them up and run the bill. I've definitely seen that several times where we've worked on bills for our members and then seen a Republican, the subsequent session, run that legislation, the identical legislation. And sometimes it's an agreement that members of the minority will go to, the folks that they have relationships with on the other side of the aisle and say, like, look, I've worked on this bill, I've vetted it, I've worked with all these stakeholders. I think it'll have a better shot if you run with it, and basically give them their bill and let them kind of run with it and have a lot of success that way. So the concepts and the policy that comes out of Democratic bills absolutely, has potential to move both on its own and then, amending other pieces of legislation or getting picked up by other members.
Excellent.
Before, Jody, we go off that, I'd like to jump into the second part of that, which is, there are numerous bills being proposed that are so clearly unconstitutional. They violate the VRA, they violate HAVA, they violate a number of federal laws, and really are fundamentally unconstitutional. Why is it that the legislature currently in the majority believes that it's, what is the psyche that makes them believe that it's okay to pass those bills? And why isn't the Rules Committee much stronger in stopping some of this? And third is, why is there no questions or raising the alarm to the cost to taxpayers when they're unconstitutional? For a group that is very concerned about the appropriate and the proper use of tax dollars. Can you speak to that for us, please? Because it's very disconcerting.
Yeah, there's definitely been some bills and some verbs passed that have constitutional issues and have been challenged on constitutional grounds. Why keep pushing them? I don't know. But certainly it's a way of getting the policy you want out there, regardless of the ultimate outcome or whether or not it'll be upheld by a court. That's one way of getting your policy out there.
In certain instances, do you think that legislators may be looking for that fight, like they want to have a court battle?
There's always the possibility that something could become a test case, right? To test how the courts are going to respond to something as well.
And then, as staff, I wonder if you can speak to this. It's hard to, but we all have this frustration. And I mean, I'm an actual lawyer, you are too, but we all also do this armchair lawyering, where you look at a bill and you go, oh, that's not constitutional. But they don't take testimony in Rules Committee, which thank God, because they'd never get through it. But yeah, do you hear any substantive discussion, or is this, and I'm not impugning the integrity of any individual staffer, because I know what kind of pressure you can be under as staff, but are they taking the rough and ready look, or they give their advice and then it's ultimately up to the members to take the advice or not? I mean, is that what we should leave people with?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I will say that, our members definitely do try to flag and get the message out there when things are moving that they think has constitutional issues. But ultimately, we can only do so much to lift that up.
Now, Penny, do you have any additional questions? I wanted to go ahead.
Yeah, on the constitutional issue, is it fair for us to understand that in the Rules Committee, they are receiving legal counsel from the legislative group or from each of the caucus legal counsels, and yet they are ignoring that legal advice? Is that what you're sort of suggesting, if you will? Okay.
I mean, I can only speak to the process is that, we certainly try to flag constitutional issues for our members. The staff of the Rules Committee will flag constitutional issues for all of the members on the committee, and what is decided to do, what people decide to do with that is ultimately their decision.
So Jane, to stay with this, because we're talking really in the constant context of RTS and what can we as the citizenry and certainly league members do in these issues of unconstitutionality. We have RTS during the committee hearings. How useful is the RTS for the citizens to speak against these bills that are clearly going to be challenged, and raising that during the Rules Committee as part of the Rules Committee hearing timeframe?
So I definitely think that RTS is a great tool to be able to get, your concerns kind of on the record and create a record that you can refer to it at later times. And absolutely, constitutional issues would be a perfectly valid thing to include in your comments.
So during the Rules Committee, we should encourage our members and others to post RTS, correct?
I think it's a great tool. Absolutely.
Okay, because we can't actually give testimony at the Rules Committee, but we can post the RTS, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to get that message out, Jody, to our members that they need to keep at it even past the committee hearing. When it gets to rules, we need to be following rules. Okay, the Rules Committee. Okay.
So it's RTS is worth it, even in the Rules Committee. And without talking about anything specific, in general, the legislators know what they're doing when they pass these laws in general. So they may get advice that they may take or leave, but we shouldn't be mad at the professional staff, I think is the message here. Right, they're giving good professional advice. And I to just build off of all of this, what do you think the big untapped potential that I see?
Before you go, because there is a comment on the chat, we should pull that thread a little bit.
Just popped up. Yep.
Yeah. So even though a piece of legislation may be clearly unconstitutional, there is a strategy, isn't there? Perhaps to challenge in different ways. And what might those different ways be?
Yeah, I think what the question is referring to is the idea that, even if something maybe isn't supported by existing case law, it could be a desire to, create test cases, right? To pass legislation to see if the courts will rule the same way that they have previously on a piece of legislation. I think that's what the question is getting at.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. So can you kind of summarize for us before we jump into some of these other areas? You can see the how to get our voice out is really important for us. So can you talk a little bit more on strategy and ways in which, when we do the RTS, we've touched on it. What are other ways for us to really make that voice heard that might have an impact? And Jody, I think tied to this is the question in the Q&A about, do the legislators read the art? Maybe we start with that and then talk about strategy. So you want to ask that question?
So the question is, do our legislators, given the RTS comments, or is it incumbent upon them to go look and see what people say? As I remember, they need to go look, right?
Yes, but we also, as staff, we brief the members each week on the bills that they're going to be hearing, and RTS is included, is not the comments, but the folks who are signed in and against are included. And that's, again, a really quick, easy way that someone can look at a bill, see the list of RTS, and realize, oh, okay, this is an issue. This is something people really have a lot to say about. And oftentimes that'll flag it for them to go check out the RTS. So it's incumbent on them. And that to me is all the more reason why that's a great tool, because the more folks that are signed in and the more that that's being used, the more it's going to kind of signal and stand out that a particular bill has a lot of commentary and a lot of people signed in.
So they do have to do it, but they're getting prompts from time to time. And then I know, in the governor's office, when bills come up to be signed or vetoed, there's a whole packet of information, and all the RTS is part of that. I'm wondering, building on that, so if RTS is the floor, like that's the most accessible thing, that's the easiest thing just about that we can do, except maybe send an email. How do you feel about some of the other things? I mean, I think we'd like to take it to the next level and start, having relationships with staff and working with staff directly. What's the most helpful way for the league to do that? Like talking points or backgrounds? Do we need to meet with people? What do you think? If you were thinking about the ultimate well-oiled advocacy machine, what would we be doing? to get our point across, especially when we can't prevail, right? Like we're trying to make a point, even though we know we may lose the bill. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So I think reaching out to the members directly, sending emails with talking points, background, the reasoning, like an explanation for this is how I feel on the bill. This is my position. I'm supportive of it or opposed to it, or I have concerns, and these are the reasons why. That's really helpful, and I think that's a really solid way of getting your point across, because from a practical standpoint, for example, I get my agenda at 5 p.m. on Thursdays. I brief my members on Tuesdays. That means that I'm spending Friday, Saturday, Sunday reading the bills and trying to understand what they do. And especially when I'm looking at a House bill, it's just been introduced, I've never seen it before. It's going to take me a while to figure out what the bill does, just from a technical standpoint, before I even get to, okay, what are the implications of this? What are the impacts? Who is this helping? Who is this hurting? What are the issues? So it's really helpful to me when I can get that feedback and get people telling me, this is what I think about the bill, and this is why I have concerns, because otherwise I'm just kind of, at least over the weekend, kind of in a vacuum, trying to figure out what this piece of legislation does. So I think emails are really effective. That's your record that you can submit and say, these are my arguments, and these are the reasons why I have concerns, or these are the reasons why I think this is really great and really important. That's really helpful from a staffer's perspective. And I think members absolutely read that and take it into consideration, and also appreciate the extra effort it takes to get that in writing and kind of get your points across.
I imagine the same would hold for like actually having a strategy and drafting questions for friendly committee members.
Absolutely.
Things like that.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. That's all definitely helpful, and things that I will share with the members, and also reaching out to members directly, and either meeting with them or sending them the information that you want to get across is also really helpful. It's definitely, after the fact, once a vote is done, you can't undo it. And so you want to get in ahead of time and let people know why you have concerns, or why, you have a position on a bill, and put them on notice and give them your reasoning.
Well, this is great. I think I mentioned, sort of at the top of our session, and this is me saying it, I'm the outsider, I'm a hired gun, so I can give the league a compliment. This is a really organized and effective advocacy organization that does want to take it to the next level. We have legislative action teams that handle issue areas like gun safety, voting rights, women's health, et cetera, education. They read bills, they summarize bills, they write testimony, they do research, they collect articles. It's a very organized and deliberate process. And I think our challenge, Jane, and we want your help, is to take more of that good work and put it in the hands of people who can use it timely, right? Because, we all get a fact sheet the night before a committee meeting, but at that point, people are going to vote how they're going to vote. And so you can go on the record, but in terms of, really impacting before the fact, using all this information that the league assembles and their process, I think we can just add on specific outreach to staff and well in advance of the subject matter committee hearings.
Judy, a couple of questions in our Q&A. So I'll go ahead and look at that, and you can look at the chat. Do the legislators track voicemails regularly, Jane? Or do voicemails have much of an impact? This is voicemail.
I think they do. I always find, I think one time I heard that there's like, in person is the best. email is the second best, and then voicemail is the third best, just in terms of making an impact. I personally like emails better because then you can look back and reread them and look things up and think like, where did I hear that? And you can pull it up faster and reference information more quickly than having to like go back through and listen to a voicemail. Not saying don't do voicemails, that's fine. I personally just find written test or written input to be more helpful, because then I can add it to the record and I can circle back and reference it when I'm trying to remember something or look something up. I just have a preference for putting things in writing.
So
what's the best day before, Jody, I'm going to take the next two before you jump in. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the best day to send an email?
So I think being aware of the committee deadlines and also the big picture deadlines is really helpful. So it differs for each committee. So it's just kind of specific to the committee. So Judiciary, for instance, we meet Wednesdays at 9 a.m., which means the agenda comes out Thursday, the previous Thursday at 5 p.m. And then the amendment deadlines are Monday at noon for strikers, and then Tuesday at 5 p.m. For regular amendments. So being aware of those deadlines and at what point in the process you want to kind of get the information out there is really, really helpful. And knowing when deadlines, when the deadlines are and when the agendas drop and when committees go to committee is helpful, right? Because it's always better for me to have the information. If my agenda comes out 5 p.m. Thursday, to get that information Friday is fantastic, as opposed to Tuesday at 5 p.m. when we're going to committee the next day. And I'm, shuffling my notes and I've got all these different emails and all of these, tons of information to keep track of. So the earlier you can kind of get that information in, the better.
So, so the best day to send an email?
It just depends what it's about. I mean, I don't think there's any particular day. I mean, maybe Fridays, just because there's no, official legislative activities on Fridays. There's no floor or anything like that. So, people can get caught up on their emails on Fridays. So probably Fridays. But if it's about a specific bill that's being heard in a committee, then it really is just contingent on the committee schedule. So if the committee's meeting Wednesday, the best day to send the email would be maybe Monday, as opposed to the Friday after the bill already got heard.
Okay, all right. One of the members, attendees, said that they were told that in addition to using RTS, that emailing or calling all members of the committee is best. Is this true?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
They want to know if, in addition to doing an RTS, contacting the committee members either through email or calling them is best.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I just have a preference for email, because that way you can pull it up a lot more quickly and see what people's input is. But definitely directly contacting people politely, right? Not being aggressive, not bombarding people. That's never a good idea. But just sending your email in advance of the committee, or making the phone call if that's what you prefer, is always good. That's a really effective way of getting your point across.
You can see that we're hot to trot on all these emails. They're going to get a barrage of them. Good for us. Yay, league members. Do they turn over the emails to staff to review and collate, or is it best to email directly to the staff? That's a really good question. I mean, do you write to the committee member or the staffer?
So the best way to do it is to kind of cover all your bases, send it to the member, but then CC the staff. That way I know, I can read it and I can be in the loop. And if there's something that, I want to look up or follow up on, then I know what they're talking about, right? Sometimes they'll get an email and say, hey, did you look into that thing that so-and-so mentioned? And I've never seen it before. So it's always good to put us on notice, but also send it directly to the members.
Jane, I want to clarify something on that question, just so the members know. When we use the word staff, there's really two levels. Are we talking about the staff of the legislator, or are we talking about the staff for the committee? Can you speak about those two distinctions?
Yeah, there's definitely differing roles amongst the staff. So each member has an assistant. Oftentimes they'll share assistants. So that assistant is going to help keep track of everything that's coming into their inbox, their voicemails, their meeting requests. And the assistant will help them to keep track of everything and to know that they've received something on a particular topic. Policy staff, on the other hand, staffs the committee, the members on the committee. And so if you're weighing in on a bill on the policy, it's usually good to include the policy staffer in your email.
I want to answer a couple more because Jody, this has to do with the resources we're providing as the league, as this is a league event, and we want to be sure our members are aware of all the resources we provide. The league sends out during legislative period, every Sunday, we send out a call to action. And at the bottom of it is a link to a spreadsheet where you can find the email and addresses for the legislators and including their staffers. So you should please use that, okay? And that's the first piece that we want you all to be aware of, okay? Second item I want to be aware of is there are many groups that do analysis of the legislative, of the bills. And it's really important to understand that what we are doing here is really talking about the league legislative lobbying work, okay? And so we as the league put out very specific bills that we either support or oppose. And so we will restrict our conversations here to the work that League is doing. If you get notices from other organizations, great, but that does not represent the League position, okay? Second is that I want to get into a little bit, Jody, because we're just about that time. And I want to give everyone an overview of how we actually run our legislative lobbying work. And so that some of the questions that are being asked would be understood well by our members who are on this call. And if you're not a member, of course, we welcome you to become a league member and join us in our work to advance democracy and advance the freedom to vote, advance voting rights, women's rights, and all the issues that matter to us. So let me begin by a couple of things, okay? Address some very straightforward items. The league is organized in, legislative work is considered state advocacy, and we're organized with the formation of an advocacy committee. My name is Penny Sharon. I forgot to introduce myself, so I will do it late in the game. And I serve as the state advocacy chair. On this call is Gittel Sier, who is the vice chair for state advocacy. The way this works, everybody, is that we have a very large team of folks that have selected issues and they do research on those issues. And we develop talking points, but we also develop testimony. So our professional lobbyists and our volunteer lobbyists are actually given well-researched and well thought through testimony to provide in person or in writing to committees. Jody is our professional lobbyist, but we also have volunteer lobbyists who are doing this work. What's important to understand is we do not expect our professional lobbyist or a volunteer lobbyist to actually write the testimony. And Jody will tell you a little bit about why this is important and impactful, because what she gets to say in front of a committee is well-researched. One thing she said to me is the first time I can take a document and speak from it and not have to worry that the facts were inaccurate, okay? And so we need to recognize the hard work that's being done by league members. Just in voting rights, we're following 100 bills, okay? And we don't arrive at our comment or position lightly. We take time and do the research. Sometimes we have to move very fast, but we're doing the heavy lift on that front. The other point that I would like to talk a little bit about is there's a question about, what typical tasks of a professional lobbyist. It varies from organization to organization. We have a contracted obligation that Jody fulfills beautifully, that we determined as a state board was what was most appropriate for the work that was needed. So you could go to a totally different organization and they may have a very different set of lists. Jody is not expected to testify or prepare testimony for every single bill that we follow, but she and a team decide who has the best bandwidth to go in front of the committees or to submit testimony. Here's something that the members that are listening ought to be very aware of. And this is our first year. We are really in full swing using our legislative analysis team, having lobbyists speak from testimonies that are both researched and well-written, and more importantly, submitting the testimony, not just in person, but in writing to every single committee that is hearing those bills. And so we have made it a point to do this religiously. This is the first week we're taking a small break in order to educate all our members about legislative and to do the work for Legislative Week. So Jody and Cassandra and several others are taking a short break this week, but I'm sure we'll be back again, next week. So this week, instead of giving testimony in person, Jody and the team have been sending the testimonies to the committee chairs and the committee members in writing so that it is entered in the record. And I think this is important for everybody to know. This is not just a light activity. This becomes part of the public record, and we put our league name next to this public record. So when Jody files or Cassandra files, it is filed on behalf of the League of Women Voters. What I want to do, Jody, is, and Jane, this is gives you a chance to kind of see how this process works, is, Jody, can you speak a little bit of, so far, how are we all doing and how are we jumping in, and how your work has been facilitated by the deep research that's being done by the LAT team, okay?
Yeah, first of all, I think we're doing great. I think I would consider us to be doing great under any circumstances, but especially in the middle of COVID and all this tension in the air, really, really doing a good job. And I can't tell you how useful the research and the testimonies are to me. Usually I do for Penny's right. Like a lobbyist does all kinds of things, different groups of things for different clients. So I do summarize bills and write testimony for other clients. It's very time consuming. And with the crush of bills, that can just be onerous. So the LAT teams, the legislative action teams, really do analysis teams. They do such good work. I think we can challenge ourselves to make even more use out of that material. I think we should be working with committee staff and, first ask them what they might need, in each subject matter area. But Jane, I'm sure you can verify. I know when I was there, just the crush of bills and other administrative junk that staff has to deal with. We should not assume. I think civilians kind of assume like, oh, they're the legislative staff. They know all this. They know more than we do. They know more than you do about process. They don't necessarily know more than you do about your topic, your issue. So I think these things that we've created and will continue to create will have even a second life as we go deeper with staff. I think that is our real challenge, and more orchestrated work with members. Like if we can't testify or testimony is going to be limited on a controversial bill, we can extend our time at the podium by having friendly questions planted. Now, all of that, takes some time and coordination, but I'm sort of newly optimistic about our ability to do this, just witnessing the league this year and the resources they're able to throw at this, the human resources, and the effort that goes into it every week. So we're hitting our stride. I think it'll be good to build up our core of volunteer lobbyists. And it's so great to have, people be able to focus on topics that are of interest to them and not feel like they have to handle the whole world. And I want to say to everybody on this call, even when we don't prevail, showing up makes a world of difference. In the Voting Rights Coalition, there was a interim decision, that's the whole gang of other organizations that are working on fighting some of these destructive voting and elections bills. They made a strategic decision earlier to kind of boycott the judiciary and government hearings that were hearing these bills. And I understand that. The league had a different position. It's our kind of, no, we've got to at least go on the record. I can't tell you how many texts, phone calls, and Facebook posts and emails that I got after the first week of people saying, thank you. There's all these other crazy people in this committee lying. We have members saying things that aren't true, but the League of Women Voters, right, has a well-researched, fact-based position, and they put it on the record. And people are so grateful that we did that. And I think we're helping other groups have courage. I know boycotts can be strategic, but we've got to keep showing up. It's very, very important. It's the one break we have on the system that we can make legislators take our input into account.
Jody, stay on that because it's a very important point that was raised in our last voting rights by a number of folks. When we don't have a presence, in a way, we're also not showing support to the legislators who are fighting the bad bills or are supporting good bills. It's really important for us, both as citizens and as organizations, to have that presence. Yes, we can do RTS, but there is nothing more powerful than being there in person and saying, and you have to make your choice on your own level of comfort, but to be there and to speak up and to make sure that the legislators who are trying to do good government know they are being supported by the citizens. I think it's really important for us to do that. Well, I'm going to entertain just a few more questions because I think they are worthwhile for us to talk about. One is, I think this is for you, Jane, which is beyond RTS comment, is it useful and worthwhile for individuals to submit written testimony? If so, where can we find out how to do so? Paula, before I forget, we can provide that as the league, some guidelines on how to write good testimony because we are doing that. But let's sort of answer the question about worthwhile for individuals to submit written testimony.
Yeah, I think the answer is absolutely yes. It's worthwhile. I definitely think that's really valuable.
All right, the second one, which I think is a good one for us to flesh out just a little bit. And what do you mean by friendly questions? We know, Jody and I know what that strategy is, but we'd like you to talk about what is it and why should we do it?
So that's when you reach out to a legislator in advance of a committee hearing and let them know what questions you think would be good to ask, so that when you're testifying, and there's time restrictions on testimony, it varies committee to committee, but for some committees, it could be as limited as we're only going to allow 3 people to testify for 2 minutes each. And so those 3 people will, coordinate in advance with certain members ahead of time that are sympathetic or just want to give them the opportunity to get their testimony on the record, and basically give them questions in advance that they can ask to then give the people who are testifying additional time to be able to make their points.
I want to read this out because Jody, you know, and Gittel's on the call. We feel like we've given up every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to get these calls to action out. So this is one of our members who says, compliment the league's call to action emails with RTS recommendations, bill descriptions, and positions are excellent and empowering. The emails are getting better every year, and they are head and shoulders above the emails I receive from other advocacy organizations. Thank you, LWV legislative teams, and a lot of our legislative team members are here. I want to put in a plug. We're going to stop with the questions, Jody. We're going way past our time. I suspect that we could have so many people, but I want to end with a couple of things, okay? Jane, thank you. I hope you will come back again, and we would love to have you back again. Jody, thank you so much. I would like very much to elevate the work of the league in doing this analysis work. We have issue teams, league members. We need you. If you care deeply about voting rights or women's rights, what we need are people. You don't have to leave your home. You don't have to testify. You can work in the background. Gittel and I and team leaders who are on this call will hold your hand, help you understand how to analyze a bill, create talking points. These are important because as we move to the next stage where we want to send our talking points officially to staff members, we need a lot of help. With 100 bills, if you think about it, to analyze a bill takes can take anything from a day and a half to maybe only an hour, because you look at it and you said, oh my God, that is the most bonehead idea ever, even just from the natural, reaction. And so, but we need the help. So what I would like you all to do, please write to us at LWVAZadvocacy@gmail.com. So please send us an email and say, hey, I am interested in helping with doing this research. Now, keep in mind that bills that are going through the committee and that actually make it past the committee to the floor are only being voted on in one chamber. They have to now go over to the other chamber. So we have a second chance. Our vice chair of advocacy calls it rinse, repeat cycle, okay? And that's what she calls that process. So we're gonna need a lot of help. We thank you all. AZ Advocacy, okay, I've put the link in the chat. Write to us. Thank you for joining us. Remember, we have several more of these sessions, and I would like certainly to encourage you, if you will, to make sure that you are signing up for all of the sessions that we have coming up. On Thursday, we will be at the Capitol in person. We have about 40 members attending, and we would like you all to join us. If you're a league member, we provide you lunch. So make sure, if you are not registered, please write to us at LWVAZadvocacy@gmail, and we'll send you a link. On Thursday, we will hear from Senate President Fan. We will hear from minority leaders Reginald Boulding and Rebecca Rios. We will also hear from Terry Goddard, the president of the Central Arizona Water Conservation District. Water is a big issue for us. And we will hear from Chris Cotterman, the president of the Arizona School Board Associations. The high priority for the league, tier 1 priority, is voting rights, climate, okay, and criminal justice. We also care deeply about land and water issues, and also we care so much about the women's rights and women's movement. We ask you all to please participate and help us. It is the power of the league voice that can make a difference. So come celebrate this 102nd year with us, empowering voters and defending democracy. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jody.
We'll see you.
Thank you.